improve soil health, fill forage supply gaps, and renovate pastures. With that, here in Lanier. Thank you.
Thank you all for having me here today. I'm really excited to be here because for about 28 years since graduating from NC State in 1987, I've been in the retail hardware and equipment rental business. That's just the route I chose to go after 15 years of putting in tobacco for my father on the farm. I decided I want to try something else. So my wife and I both got into that business and have been very successful in the hardware and equipment rental business. But if you've ever dealt with the public a day in your life, try doing it for 28 years and you decide you might want to try to do something else before you leave this earth. So at that time, my father had retired and had begun to rent the farm out. So that wasn't a very viable income for him, and he was having to do some things like sell off some land. So we started purchasing the land back from him and putting it in pasture. And that's kind of how we got into the farming situation. The way we chose to take care of the land was to use cattle and to be able to create an income so that we could afford to keep the land. Like I say, I'm the third generation on this land that we're on. It was a tobacco farm for my grandfather and my father, and that served the family very well. But there came a time to make a change, and we decided to go to the beef cattle is what we've chosen to do. And so doing that, my father had put in a CRP program with loblolly pines, and that was done in all the erodible areas along the edge of the farm, down at the swamp, and anywhere that was erodible, he was able to put in a CRP program with pines. And by the time I got involved with farming, these pines were beginning to need to be thinned. The program was running out. We weren't getting paid for that program, and I had to figure out a way to make a profit. So we cleaned out under those pines and planted grass, and we call that silver pasture, is the way it's known today. As far as our cow herd, we have about 140 head of brood cows. They're commercial cow, Gelbvieh and Red Angus, Black Angus mix. We sell backgrounded calves that are 60 days backgrounded. Those are the only cows that we feed on the farm, are those calves during that 60-day process, and that's just a supplement along with them grazing. We retain our own heifers. Anything that doesn't make the cut, that doesn't get bred in 60 days and calve in the first 45 days of the calving season gets culled and used into a meat program, which we sell meat off the farm. And we also sell some in our retail hardware store as well. The beginning, we put in Kentucky 31. We just didn't know any better. That's what everybody had. That's what we decided to plant. So we planted about 3/4 of the acres or 2/3 of the acres in Kentucky 31. The rest we planted in seeded Bermuda grasses, which were kind of the raves back at that time. We found the seeded Bermudas to divert back to common Bermuda after a couple of years, and we got very little production out of that. We got more production out of the crabgrass that came up volunteer in those fields than we were getting out of Bermuda grass. The Kentucky 31, we knew about end-of-fight problems. We knew it was toxic, but there wasn't really a whole lot of other choices at that time, and we just didn't know the magnitude of what that end-of-fight problem may be on a cow herd. The cows seem to be doing all right, but if you're not comparing them to cows that aren't on it, you don't know how bad they may be doing on it. As we acquired new lands, we kept buying land from my father and renting more land from him, and now we have the whole farm, the whole 400 acres. My wife and I own about 300 acres of it. My dad still owns 100 acres, which we rent from him. Of that 400 acres, about 100 of it, a little over 100 of it, is in silver pasture. As we were kept taking over new blocks, everything has a fence around it. Every bit of it is grazed. We graze 365 days a year. The only stored feed we do is we purchase about a little less than a bale of hay per cow per mature animal per year. That is used during the time when we're AI breeding in the fall. And that's just so we can keep them in proximity of the barn for that AI period. And that's the time we choose to feed hay while we're stockpiling our fescue for winter feed. As we took over new blocks, we found out that we should be planting novel fescues. So we started planting novel fescues. As we got enough acreage of that to where we could take a cow calving cycle all the way through and keep one particular herd of about 20, 25 cows completely off of toxic fescue for a cycle, and we were able to manage and keep up with the calving weights, the weaning weights of the whole herd. And we had separate herds. We had like 4 herds at that time, and we kept that one herd completely off of the toxic fescue, and we noticed about 70 pounds increase in weaning weights on that herd versus the other 3 herds in that first year. Once we did that, that was about the year the calf prices went so high. We did the math then, and it was a no-brainer that we needed to get rid of some Kentucky 31 and that we needed to increase our novel fescue. So we began a 5-year plight of completely converting the whole farm to anything that was in toxic fescue to novel fescues. In doing that, we had to try some other grasses to take care of the summer slump. We've tried gamma grass. We've tried Sudan grass. We've had some switchgrass at the time, but we kind of got focused and got back and figured out that if every acre we could get to grow in novel fescue with legumes was a benefit to the farm. That was going to make the best impact on our farm, was to have it growing in fescue and novel fescue with clover mixed. So we kind of phased out some of our gamma grasses and all of our trials that we had done in native grasses because they just weren't filling our niche for getting that cow in condition to get her bred in the fall. We do have a lot of crabgrass that we use mainly now in the silver pasture to keep those cows off of the fescue during July and August. Well, June and July when it's so hot in our climate. We are in a climate that is really borderline for being able to grow fescue, but we found that we can do it with some intense management. Everything is intensive grazed. We don't have a paddock that's over about 8 acres. Everything is fenced in, and everything is in a 4 to 8 acre pasture. So we got a lot of paddocks with 400 acres, and all of them 4 to 8 acres. You have a lot of paddocks to move cows around in. If you look on the right there, you see a mix that we've got. We've got it growing in those trees as well as along the side of it there. The conversion to endophyte, to the novel endophytes was a big challenge. We found that we've tried it about every way you can try it, but our preferred methods now is to spray it and kill it in the spring. Plant a nice BMR type sorghum Sudan or Sudan grass in the summer, and get a good shading all summer long, and then we strip graze that off and spray it again before planting in the fall. With that, it kind of became a positive aspect. We made a positive aspect out of the conversion, in that we were able to get some real good body condition on our brood cows with calves on them during the fall right there before we begin to breed. We don't get a really heavy frost till about November, so we were able to make some benefit out of that conversion process and to help our cow herd. We are now completely done with that, so we're sort of entering a new phase on the farm. We have no more Kentucky 31 that we're aware of. Who knows if you ever get rid of all of it. But all of our fields have been converted to novel endophytes, and most of our annuals now are used in the silver pasture in the woods. This is a picture on the left of what it looks like when we're strip grazing that Sudan grass. That stuff gets very tall, but the cows seem to be able to get it down to their level very shortly after you strip graze them in there. On the right is a typical what we're on right now. We had about 5 inches of snow week before last, and it snowed on grass looking just like that, which is stockpiled novel fescue, and we're strip grazing in that at this point. If we can keep our cows off of our fescue, we need about 1 acre per cow-calf pair, like you see there on the right, to get that cow to spring to the 1st of March. And by then, where we started at Thanksgiving, it's emerging back to where we got a 6-inch swath where we can go back and graze her again over that. Usually the strip grazing of the fescue is done, like I say, from Thanksgiving to March, and those cows really put on good gains, and especially those calves that are on those cows in that every day. The calves are able to forward graze. All of our single wires and our poly wires we put at about 32 inches, and the calves, they kind of scatter out all over the farm, but they're still within a 3-wire perimeter fence that's around the outside, and they're able to, they usually go and eat all the clover in all the paddocks before the cows ever get there. The silver pasture, which is probably what we're mostly known for in our area, there's not very much of that going on there. This is an example of our cows there, and these cows are calving in September. If we didn't have silver pasture, we wouldn't be able to calve in August and September and a little bit in October. We usually calve the last part of August all the way through September, with about 95% of the calves being born the first 40 days of our calving season. It's pretty hot then down where we are. We're in Pender County, down on the coastal plain of North Carolina. We're about 30 miles from the coast, about 30 miles from Wilmington. It's nothing to see 99, 100-degree days during that time of the year when we're calving. It's on the tail end of it, but it can still happen. But to have that cow in there eating fescue grass or crabgrass and be in the shade like that all day long, it really makes for a healthy calf and a good start for the cow to get her back in shape so that she can get bred on time. We're doing some experiment with about every kind of grass that we can grow down there in the silver pasture. I think on the left there, that's a combination of millet and mojo crabgrass that we planted. Had some good success with that. We're excited about trying more of that. And I think that's a raised crazy mix on the right there that we planted in the spring as well. And that's about middle of summer there where you see that bull grazing in there. Cows in there in that atmosphere eating, it's just hard to explain how calm and how content they seem to be in there during those hot summer months. These trees you see now in the last 2 months on our farm, we have thinned them. We're also in the timber business. We're not it's just not for the shade of the cattle. We're in there trying to grow a crop of timber as well. We've taken about half of the trees out now, and we're down to about 60 to 70 loblolly pines per acre. In taking those trees out, it was a reason to do that. The trees that were left in there that were taken out, they were all marked before the timber guys come in and take them out, and we took out all the bad. It was a kind of what they call a trash run. You take out all the bad trees and you leave the very best trees for your final cutting, which will happen about the next 5 years. That's we have a lot of wildlife that the turkeys really love the silver pasture too. They love getting in there and picking behind the cows and with the clover and that kind of stuff. So we've been a turkey boom on our farm since we got into this kind of type of management. When we're not strip grazing off stockpile grass, we're rotational grazing, and we keep cattle on it for a week and then move them on, and then it's at least 30 days before they're back in there. That's imperative in a silver pasture, silviculture to protect the trees as well as the forage in there from overgrazing and from trampling. The market advantage, like I said earlier, when we are able to calve in those early, late summer months or calve a little earlier in the fall than most people, gives us a market advantage of being able to sell calves that have been backgrounded for 60 days and that'll be pushing 8 weights in June. And we like to hit that high calf market in June. There's not a whole lot of 8 weights available to be sold in June from other farms. And that would not be possible without having the silver pasture for those cows to be in when they're calving. The goals on our operation is to try to get the soil built, try to make it a better farm than it was when we took it over. And we're really conscious about the next generation that's coming along. That's my first grandchild there, and I've got the second one on the way. And she loves the farm, and we want it to be something there for her so she can have the opportunity to do like I did and come back to the farm if she so chooses. We're going to continue to explore different forages in that silviculture. Now we have more sunlight to the ground. I think we can grow about anything we want to in there. Do I have any questions? Yes, sir.
How did you initially establish the silviculture? Did you take the stumps out, or did you work around them?
Well, fortunately, all of our trees were planted in rows, you know, like you do a conventional pine plantation. When we thinned, it made an alleyway. It left a row of stumps, but we figured out a way to clean all that brush out, a lot of manual labor. But we were able to clean all the brush and stuff out. We used some chemicals in there to control the brush and the vines and stuff. Poison ivy was a big one growing in there. And then we just went in there with a light disking to turn to get so that we could plant, and then a cultipacking, and that's how we got the grass growing in there. We farmed around the stumps. We found those stumps were going to be a big deal, and we thought it might not be able to make this happen, but the stumps were gone in 3 years. They rotted off, and now they're completely gone. So we farm between the rows, you know, is the way we think about it. Under those trees, it was in the neighborhood of 5.5. We had the lime, and we put poultry litter in there before planting. Most all of those, last time I took a soil sample was last year. Most all my silviculture now is approaching 6 pH. About the cattle damaging the bark on the trees. If you leave them in there too long, it can. They'll start, you can see where they rub it a lot, but usually after one day of them rubbing it, they kind of get the rubbing urge off out of them, and they don't rub it near as bad after the first day. If they've been in an open pasture and not available to silver pasture for a pretty good while, especially in the spring when they're shedding off, the first thing they'll do is every one of them will run to a pine tree and they'll scratch on it. But that ends pretty quick. Haven't seen any damage. We also have left out a paddock or two that we have not got cows in and don't have it under grass, just to have a comparison, and there's no more tree loss in the silver pasture. Actually, the trees look a lot better from the benefits from the nutrients in the silver pasture than they do in the control areas that we have on the farm.
Time for one more question.
We actually retain all our replacement heifers that on the farm ourselves, and we background them on our novel fescues and on our summer annuals that we have, and we get about 1.6 pound a day gain on this past year's heifers without any supplemental feed. Only thing we feed, like I say, that we use any supplemental feed on would be the backgrounded calves that we sell on co-mingled sales.